It was past midnight. After tossing and turning in bed for hours, I finally got up to grab some water. The lights in the living room were still on. Yeah, it was that night my brother Casey had sent Paul over to stay with me for a while. When I heard what had happened to him, it broke my heart. His wife had cheated on him, and his life was completely shattered. Paul, married to the same woman for years, had been blindsided in the worst way. Casey's son was also going through a rough patch. He couldn't deal with it either. Jessica, please take him in, Casey had begged me. He needs some peace. I didn't really know Paul, but I knew the reason he was in such a bad place was because of some woman's betrayal. We'd already been through so much loss in our family. I mean, I lost my husband Jacob 7 years ago. I was 60, and he died suddenly of a heart attack. 1 minute, we were building our dream house. It was supposed to be done in a year, and the next, everything just stopped. Jacob's death flipped my whole life upside down. I was left alone, and for years I've carried this emptiness inside me. But lately, the loneliness ... it's been hitting harder. Tonight was one of those nights. Are you ready? Because this isn't just some ordinary story. This is about the lines that blur, emotions that spiral out of control, and the silent screams of a confession waiting to surface. Every moment of this might spark something deep inside you, emotions you didn't even know were there, pushing boundaries you didn't think existed. If this is the kind of story you've been waiting to hear, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world to me. I slowly made my way toward the living room. A few steps in, I saw Paul sitting there, watching some romantic movie on TV. At that moment, the only thing on my mind was making sure Paul found some peace during his stay here. But little did I know, life had other plans. A lot of things were already going wrong, and it would only take one step, just one, to change everything. Paul turned to me and asked, "Did I wake you up?" His voice had this mix of uncertainty and a desperate need for some kind of peace. I was standing there in my nightgown, but honestly, that didn't matter. I'd never felt lonelier than I did right then. "No," I said, giving him a soft smile. "I just came to get some water." The truth was, I felt so alone in that moment, I didn't want it to end just yet. Maybe spending a little time with Paul would make the night less empty. Maybe watching a movie together could make me feel like something in my life was still normal, like peace was still possible. "Come sit. Let's watch it together," Paul said, motioning to the empty spot on the couch next to him. It wasn't a tough decision to make. I wanted to spend the night with even just a bit of warmth, a little meaning, so I sat down next to him. The movie started, but I couldn't really focus on the scenes. There was something inside me, something I couldn't quite figure out. Paul's presence, the way the stranger was sitting right beside me, the slight nervousness in his voice, it all felt so different. As the romantic scenes in the movie played out, I found myself looking away from the screen for a moment. The couple on the screen getting closer to each other reminded me of things I thought I'd forgotten. And then, accidentally, I turned my head slightly and brushed against Paul's arm. I pulled back quickly. "Sorry," I blurted out, my eyes darting away in panic. "I didn't mean to." Paul stayed quiet for a second, then gave a small nod and said, "It's okay. Don't worry about it." But in that moment, the space between us somehow felt smaller. The movie kept playing, but nothing felt the same anymore. Neither Paul nor I could find any real peace in that moment. Even though we were sitting so close, it felt like the emptiness inside each of us kept getting in the way. I'd remember that night as the start of something more complicated than I could have imagined. That moment was like a signal of how everything was about to change. The night had taken a strange turn. Sitting there on the couch, watching a romantic movie with Paul, I couldn't help but feel like I was drawn to him. Even though I was in my nightgown, sitting so close to another man after being alone for so long, there was this tension building up that I couldn't ignore. Paul's presence wasn't comforting, it was making me realize things. Maybe it was because I've been alone for years, but being so close to another man again this way stirs something in me. It was confusing and weird, and I couldn't figure it out, but I was definitely feeling something for Paul that night. It all started to become clear. I didn't relax for even a second until the movie ended. And when it did, I got up, went to my room, and just sat there on my bed for a while. I needed to think. But about what? I had no idea. Sleeping with all of those feelings swirling around wasn't like hitting the reset button. I tossed and turned the whole night. The lack of sleep dragged me into the morning. When the new day began, I decided to sit at the piano, hoping to shake off the unease inside me. I'd been alone for almost 7 years now, and every morning, I just wanted to feel like things were still normal somehow. The piano felt like an old friend, one that brought me a little peace and reminded me of Jacob. As my fingers danced across the keys, I hoped this morning would bring me some relief too. Then I heard a sound outside. A shadow appeared in front of the window. It was Paul, out for an early morning walk around town. At first, I didn't even notice him, but as the melody filled the air, he opened the front door and walked in. I kept playing, unaware he was there, until I suddenly caught sight of him standing quietly, watching me. My fingers froze for a second, and that tension inside me, it came rushing back, stronger than ever. But Paul just smiled at me like nothing in the world was out of place. "That was beautiful," he said. "Thank you, honestly. That's the best birthday gift I've ever gotten." For a moment, I felt a rush of excitement when Paul walked in. It felt like the room shifted, like we'd stepped into a different space altogether, and then he said something in a calm, genuine tone that I'd never heard before. "What I just said, it's true. Watching you for even just a few minutes was the best thing I've experienced in a long time. And did you know I turned 40 today?" It didn't take long for me to realize how much those words stirred something in me. I averted my eyes, trying to balance the swirling emotions with the sweetness of his compliment. Right then, for the first time in years, I didn't feel so alone, and I could sense that something was starting to change. After the excitement of that morning, I found myself looking forward to the evening. Learning that it was Paul's 40th birthday made me want to do something, anything to make the day feel normal, special even. An idea hit me, and I turned to him. "It's your birthday today," I asked. "Well, then let's celebrate. How about we have some wine and cut a cake tonight?" Paul gave me this surprised smile. "Well, if you're suggesting it, I guess tonight might actually turn out to be fun," he said with this playful glint in his eyes. Then, after a brief pause, he added with a teasing grin, "But there's a catch. You have to play the piano for me again. No getting out of it." Laughing, I tried to shake off some of the nervousness building inside me. "All right," I said, "but only if we open a good bottle of wine and make a proper toast." Even that small exchange left a deeper impression on me than I wanted to admit. I could feel the emotions bubbling up, but I pushed them aside, telling myself this was just about making things feel normal for one night. It was just a birthday, a little celebration, that's all. But then Paul said something so casual yet so startling. It threw me off. He looked at me with that same innocent expression and asked, "How old are you?" "What? 45. I froze for a second. I'd always tried to feel younger than my age, but hearing such an honest compliment caught me off guard. I couldn't help but smile. "Oh, not quite," I said, brushing it off. But it was hard to hide the small spark of excitement his words gave me. Inside, I felt like I was being pulled into directions lost between the warmth he was showing me and the storm of emotions I was trying to keep in check. By the time evening came, Paul and I had opened our wine and settled in to celebrate. As we talked, we got closer. His warmth, the way he paid attention, it made me feel at ease. There was something between us, a pull, something growing stronger with every passing moment. Inside, a voice kept telling me to treat this like a normal, ordinary night. But then Paul raised his glass, smiled at me, and asked playfully, but with those lively eyes of his, "So when are you going to play something for me? You know you can't get out of it." For a moment, I hesitated. Then I took a deep breath and said, "All right, let's do it." I sat at the piano, letting the melody flow again, hoping it would calm the storm inside me. With each note, though, I felt something shift, like I was being drawn closer to him. Even as I got lost in the music, somehow I found comfort in the way he listened, the way he appreciated it, like it was the most important thing in the world. What I thought would be a simple celebration turned into something else entirely. That moment, it felt like a glimpse of something I hadn't felt in so long, something real. My vision blurred as my fingers glided over the keys. Each note stirred something in me, but I couldn't quite figure out what it was. Paul's voice echoed faintly in my mind, and it felt like my heart and my head were slowly drifting apart. I was so lost in it all, I didn't even know when to stop. My hands instinctively searched for another melody when suddenly Paul appeared beside me. He placed his hands gently over mine. "You're an amazing woman," he said, his voice soft and a little shaky, "and you play the piano so beautifully." His words echoed in my head, leaving a strange emptiness behind. His warm hands over mine had this way of grounding me, even as my emotions spiraled deeper. "Come on, you're tired," he said softly, his tone calm and reassuring. "Let's sit on the couch for a bit. I've got a surprise for you." With his gentle touch, Paul guided me to the couch. I still couldn't quite process what was happening, but something about the moment felt incredibly profound. When I sat down, my thoughts were still swirling. Then Paul walked back to the piano. I watched as his hands moved effortlessly over the keys, and suddenly he started playing my favorite melody. I recognized it instantly. It was the song I had loved for years, the one that always stirs something deep in me. As he played, my heart raced. Every note brought back memories I wasn't ready to face. I just sat there, listening as the music filled the room and ignited something inside me. After a while, I couldn't just sit anymore. The melody he played, it pulled me up, almost like it was calling me. Slowly, I walked toward him, trying to calm the chaos in my chest. When I got close, standing right next to him, I didn't know what to do. "You're really good at this," I said, my voice trembling as I tried to hide how fast my heart was beating. "And you're playing my favorite song." My words hung in the air, echoing in the room as my emotions clashed within me. "Who are you, Paul?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You're really getting to me." I've never felt like this before. I was completely overwhelmed, confused, excited, terrified, and happy all at once. Our eyes met, and we were so close I could feel his breath. Looking into his eyes, it felt like I was falling into another world, and just like that, time stopped. The way he looked at me made my heart race and warmed me. In that moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Everything made sense in a different way in that moment. It felt like the world had narrowed down to just the two of us. Everything else faded away, and suddenly, everything made sense in a completely different way. My eyes locked onto his, and for a split second, nothing else mattered. All the confusion, fear, and racing thoughts just disappeared, leaving only Paul and me. His hands rested lightly on my waist, firm enough to ground me, but gentle enough not to push. My head was spinning, and I couldn't tell if it was the wine or the feelings rushing through me. Without Paul holding me steady, I wasn't sure I'd still be standing. The look in his eyes made me feel even closer to him, and in that moment, his warmth and the sense of safety I felt beside him gave me balance amidst all the chaos. "You need to rest," he said softly, guiding me toward the couch. His words were calming, and the feeling of his hands on my waist both comforted and unsettled me. When I sat down, his hands lingered there for a moment longer, and our eyes locked again. I had no idea what to say or how to feel. The warmth of his touch made the night unforgettable, powerful in a way I couldn't quite explain. That night on the couch turned into one of the most thrilling, unforgettable nights of my life. Everything happened so quickly that I barely had time to process it all before morning came. When I opened my eyes, I got up and walked toward the living room. The smell of coffee wafted in from the kitchen, pulling me out of my half-asleep state, and there he was, Paul, standing in the kitchen shirtless, making coffee. His body, still warm and strong from the night before, was on full display, and me, well, thinking back to last night sent this strange sensation through my whole body. My nightgown and underwear were still scattered across the floor. Just the memory of it all made me feel nervous yet excited at the same time. Replaying the night in my head only made me feel more confused. What was going to happen now? How could I even begin to figure that out? But one thing was clear, there was a connection between us I'd never felt before. This night, this moment, felt like the start of something that could change my life forever. Paul turned from the kitchen and looked at me, his eyes soft, his smile warm. There was this silence between us, thick with unspoken words. As I stood there watching him, I tried to figure out what was happening, what I was feeling. Everything was such a mess. I had no idea what to do next, how to move forward. It was like I was lost in that moment, completely caught up. But at the same time, I could feel something shifting, and I knew there was no stopping it. Standing there as Jessica, all I could feel was this mix of excitement and confusion swirling through me. Since last night, I hadn't been able to make sense of anything. Everything had happened so fast. My clothes were still on the floor, and as I glanced at them, I closed my eyes for a second, shaking my head slightly. Everything was so complicated. I couldn't tell what I was thinking, let alone what I was feeling. I quickly got up and headed for the bathroom. I needed a shower. I needed to clear my head, to step away from the whirlwind of emotions I was drowning in. My nightgown and underwear stayed right where they were. I didn't care about the mess. All I wanted was to lose myself under the stream of hot water, to escape the chaos, even if just for a little while. After a while, I stepped out of the shower, wrapping myself in a towel, and then suddenly the door opened. Paul was standing there. I froze for a moment. Neither of us moved. Our eyes met and held, locked in a gaze so intense it felt like the world stopped spinning. I didn't know what to do. The confusion and emotion in my eyes must have been obvious because I felt completely exposed, vulnerable, and yet somehow I couldn't stop the words rising to the surface, spilling out of me. I don't even know what's going on, I said, my voice trembling just a little. What we're doing, I know it's so wrong, but it feels like I'm dreaming. Paul took another step closer to me. His eyes were filled with so many conflicting emotions. Neither of us knew what was going to happen. I wanted to say something in that moment, but the words just wouldn't come. Your coffee's ready, Paul said, his voice a little shaky. As my eyes drifted to him, it hit me how messy and yet strangely beautiful everything was. I didn't think about the future. I just lived in that moment. As I sat down with my coffee, the confusion in my heart was still swirling. Sitting with Paul, our eyes locking, remembering what happened between us, it had all happened so fast. I could barely keep up. What had we done? What did we feel? I wanted to say something to make sense of it all, but finding the right words felt impossible. Jessica, Paul started, his voice strained. What we did was so wrong. I know that. Why did we let this happen to us? His eyes showed guilt, but there was also understanding. He knew, just like I did, that things had spiraled out of control. We should regret this, shouldn't we? We never should have done it. There was a pause. My thoughts were tangled, but finally, I found my voice. Yeah, maybe it all happened so fast. But no, it wasn't right. We let things get too complicated. And now, looking back, it just feels like none of it makes sense. This was a mistake for both of us, I said. There was a weight on my chest, but also a strange relief in admitting that we'd both gone too far. Paul stayed quiet for a moment, staring at the floor. Then he looked up at me. Let's pretend this never happened. Jessica, he said, his voice steady but soft. I think for both our sakes, we need to leave this behind. What good could come from dragging this on? Especially when things are already such a mess. We need space from each other. When he said that, something inside me resonated. He was right. Continuing this would only hurt both of us. Yeah, I said, taking a deep breath. Maybe this is for the best. If you leave, maybe that's the solution. It's probably the healthiest choice for both of us. Paul nodded, his expression firm. I need to do this, he said. It's the right thing for both of us. We sat in silence for a few seconds, just looking at each other. In that moment, we both realized how important this decision was. Accepting that what we had done, those dark moments, were just a mistake. Facing that truth might be the first step towards setting things right. And instead of dragging each other down in such a tangled way, giving each other space felt like the only way forward. I hope you enjoyed my story. It's been such an exciting journey, and sharing it with you has truly made me happy. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. Also, your likes and comments mean the world to me. Hearing your thoughts and feelings really keeps me motivated. Your support helps me so much in creating more. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you in the next story.